Welcome to Glad You Asked. So glad you're able to join me today. Today's question is, how can I be more patient? Have you ever felt like you needed to be more patient? Of course you have. I have as well. Patience is something that we all have to learn, and it is definitely something that it will take a process in your life. Patience is something that comes from a struggle that you're usually going through, and something that maybe you have to work on daily. And so if you're like me, maybe your patience wears thin. You know, we live in a culture where instant gratification and I want it and I want it now sort of a mentality seems to be the way of the day. And so patience is something that we all have to learn. We know historically it's been said that patience is a virtue, but also I would offer to you, patience is also a fruit of the Spirit, meaning that it's something that the Spirit produces in us. And really there's only one way to learn it. And so we go to Galatians chapter 5, you see the fruit of the Spirit listed. Just before that is a listing of the acts of the flesh that Paul talks about, and then he leads into contrasting the acts of the flesh with the fruit of the Spirit. And so the acts of the flesh are something that we do for ourselves. It's our self-effort. It is sinfulness. It is things that are for our pleasure. But the fruit of the Spirit means that it's not something necessarily the believer produces in himself, but the Holy Spirit who's come to reside in you produces in you and through you. And so it's important that we understand that. So when it comes to understanding what patience is, we can begin to learn how it grows in our life and how we can be more patient. With that said, let me talk about the word patience for a little bit. As you read Galatians chapter 5, verse 22, it says, you know, the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, and patience. And that word patience is an interesting word. In the Greek, it's macrothemia. And macrothemia literally means slow to burn. So if you think about it's not quick to burn, which would be the opposite of slow to burn. And so if it's quick to burn, it means it goes away really fast. And sometimes that is the way we are when it comes to being patient. But if we're really patient, we're going to be slow to burn. You know, God, it says, is patient with us. It means He's slow to burn with us. In other words, when we don't respond to Him and when we're disobedient, He is patient with us. And the reason, like Peter writes, that He's patient with us, wanting us to come to salvation. God is slow to burn with us. He's not He's not fast to anger and fast to act toward us. And so we want to be patient. The KJV renders this same word, patience, as long-suffering. Macrothemia being long-suffering. It means you can suffer long. And so I really like that idea of patient, because isn't that what patience is suffering long? So somebody has asked me as a pastor before, just like this question, how can I become more patient? And you know, we always talk about, well, you can pray for it, but the thing about praying for patience, and if you've ever prayed for patience, you'll know this to be true. If you pray for patience, what can you expect? You can expect suffering, because patience is developed through suffering and waiting and expectation. And so that's what it means to be patient, is I suffer long waiting on these things to be fulfilled in my life. So patience comes by three things that I think that we have to be aware of. One is that it's a spiritual production, that I'm not going to try like, oh, I'm just going to be more patient, but I'm actually going to be patient as I trust the Holy Spirit to work in my life and through my circumstances and my relationships. And secondly, so it's first of all spiritual production. Secondly, it's a circumstantial pressure that we feel. So once we go through some circumstances that are difficult, we learn to be more patient. It doesn't waiting feel like suffering sometimes. If you've ever been to a doctor's office, they have what is called the waiting room. It's a place where you have to be patient to wait on the doctor. So you're not only a patient in the doctor's office, but you have to practice patience as you wait. And so waiting in itself means that you're going to have to go through some amount of suffering, which goes to the third point. And so it's spiritual production, it's a circumstantial pressure, but it's also time passing at the same time. And so if you're waiting on something or someone, you're going through this difficulty. And so let me give you a quick story of how I've seen God develop patience in my own life. Back when I was single and I was in seminary, I was trying to win Trish, who is my now lovely bride, and I knew that I was being a little pushy in the relationship. I was wanting the relationship to move faster than it was. You've probably been there. It's like you want this thing to pick up speed. You want to be able to get the relationship to move forward. And I had found that because I was being impatient, it was impacting our relationship in a negative way. And so I started praying one day for God to help me be more patient, which means our relationship was going to go slower, which it meant that our relationship was probably going to be a little bit more difficult. And I was finding that to be true. And so one day, Trish had come home from a Bible study, and we were hanging out together. And I said to her, I said, you know, what'd y'all do at Bible study? And she said, well, today we talked about the fruit of the Spirit. And she talked about the fruit that she felt like was being produced in her life. And she even asked me, she said, what do you see being produced in my life? And so I told her what I'd seen. And so she said, well, so I said back to her, I said, what fruit do you see being produced in my life? And she said, this had been several weeks after I'd started praying for patience. And you know what she said? She said, I've noticed recently that you've been more patient with me. Oh, and I was like so excited. I was like, yes, Holy Spirit is producing this in my life. Even though it had been a difficult time and I was trying to slow the pace down, I was so excited because she noticed that I had been more patient, which means the Holy Spirit was at work in me, meaning I was trusting God to begin to work in our relationship instead of trying to make things happen myself. And so that's a good way for us to learn to be more patient, is to realize that the Holy Spirit is producing this in us. And so we have to learn to trust. We have to learn to wait on God. And we all like things to be done in our time and our way, but often it's not done that way. I'm not much of a gardener, but one of the things I remember hearing, I was listening to some podcast recently, and I heard some leadership lessons on planting bamboo. Now, I don't know a ton about bamboo. I know what it looks like, and I heard this story that when you plant bamboo, one of the things that has to happen is it takes about 3 to 4 years before you ever see bamboo sprout from the ground. In other words, when you plant it, it takes a really long time. I mean, think about it, 3 years before you ever see it sprouting. So what you discover is, hey, bamboo is planted, and what has to happen first? So the roots have to grow down before the tree ever grows up. And so that's how bamboo works. But I've also found that that's how life works. So if you plant bamboo, one of the things you have to know, this is going to take some time. It's going to take some circumstance. It's going to take some production that you cannot see before you get the production that you want to see. And that's what it's like with patience. So, you know, the farmer learns this all the time. They plant the seeds, they water it, hopefully it rains and fertilizes. But the thing about a farmer is, a lot of times what's happening, it can't be seen. And so what does a farmer have to have? He has that patience. And you have to learn that over time through going through the process. And so if you are in a place of your life where maybe you feel like you're impatient, I want to remind you of the 3 things. One is the spiritual aspect that the Holy Spirit produces in your life. And He does this through your trusting and waiting on Him. And then the other issue is circumstance. That means in order for you to gain patience, you have to go through some sort of trial or difficulty so that you learn this. And then the third part that I remind you is that sometimes things just take time, and that you have to be patient during that time. You have to wait on the Lord. So today, if you're struggling with being impatient, slow yourself down. Remember that God works through time and through your circumstances to produce into you the patience He wants, the ability to suffer long, the ability to be slow to burn. And that's what it means to be patient. And I hope you'll be more and more patient as you trust the Holy Spirit to do this great work in your life. Thank you for joining us. We're glad you asked. Please share this with a friend. Post in the comments. If you have a question you would like for me to answer, I'd love for you to send that to info@gracepointchurch.org. And I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll talk to you soon. May God bless.